I remember my grade 5 teacher teaching us about settlers and savages and Indians and Métis and Native people, and how if you were Native, you were called a savage. If you were a Native woman, you were called a squaw. I remember that very clear, and I remember my teacher telling us that, asking my cousin Nellie and I if we were Métis or if we were full Native, and they talked about how if you were Métis, at least you had some white in you, and it was better to have some white in you than being full Native.
Growing up, that's like all I've been around is like teachers would say, like teachers, people who are like authority figures would come up to me and then they would say like, you're not going to go anywhere. You won't be able to do that. I don't think you should do that just because you're just going to disappoint yourself. And then recently, a student came up to me and she said that another student had said that I was a dirty res dog and that I needed to go die at a residential school. Like that happened last week.
And I'm sitting there drinking my grape juice, and that little girl comes out and she says, "My mom said I can't play with you because you're dirty." The memory that I have from it is that grape juice. And to this day, I don't drink grape juice. I don't, that's that memory. It's crap.
The worst one for me was always going into a store and having salespeople hover over you, and when you tried to try something on, they really didn't want you to, and everything you touched, they kind of tried to grab it like you were going to steal it or something. It always made me very, very uncomfortable. It always made me really question why, because my money spends as good as anybody else.
When I was growing up, so when I go to powwows or when I'd introduce myself to other Indigenous people and I would tell them that I'm also Indigenous, they would be like, "Really?" Or they would just kind of have a delayed reaction, and as some sort of like I wasn't as accepted as I would have been if I wasn't Black. And also with like my family, I think for some of them in the older generation, it was a little bit difficult for them to come to terms that I wasn't just Indigenous and white, I was also Black.
Maybe it's because I'm light-skinned that I never really felt racism as much, or it's because I just have that I have the mindset of Kiam. It doesn't matter, let it go, and I don't let anything bother me anymore.
I've never experienced discrimination like firsthand, because a lot of people like living here don't know that I'm Indigenous. They just they assume that I'm not white, but they don't know what I am. And so I've just heard remarks that have been made about Indigenous people. I know that I do have like some white privilege when it comes to certain things, and that I'm able to, I don't know, succeed better since I am white passing.
Like in the 70s, we couldn't tell people of what was happening in ceremonies. And to get to see a healer, we had to go through so many people to get to that person. They didn't advertise, or they weren't open up like today it is. Like, they're so fortunate today that they can, go to a healer, or, compared to the 60s and 70s when it was so hushed that, you had to know somebody to know somebody to know somebody to get to those people.
It wasn't until they were a bit older and I actually started working here at the Friendship Center that I started to embrace the culture. So as a young child, I grew up traditionally but not spiritually, and so coming to the Grand Prairie Friendship Center, it helped me to embrace the spirituality piece of our culture.
Doing traditional dance and jigging, and I would say I was most connected with my culture through my auntie. So she volunteered at the Friendship Center a lot. I kind of just always like followed in her shadow, and like I'd do certain things with her, and like we had like a jigging group that I really enjoyed. And she was probably my biggest influence when it came to connecting with my culture.
If you're trying to become connected with your culture, then I'd say you need to be active in your community and be able to find outlet or resources to help with that, because there is a lot of opportunities in most cities to become connected with your culture, and you just need to become involved in your community and be looking for those outlets. And if there's any way that you can, like if you know somebody in your area that does ceremony or traditional things, to see if you can connect with them to, I don't know, offer to get teachings or participate in ceremony.
Over the years, I've met a lot of Indigenous people that were very fair-skinned, that were accepted in mainstream. And when they told me their stories, it was kind of like they knew who they were. They knew that they were Indigenous. They knew that they, like, who they were, and they didn't fall into, being somebody else.
All that who we are, we're connected to the land, we're connected to this world, and we have purpose in our lives and purpose in our communities as well. And it's not feeding that energy when it's there. We can always say, well, because I'm Indigenous, that's why they're treating me like this. And a lot of times it comes down to a person's personality and perspective. And either you can sit there and be the victim, or you can sit there and say, I'm not going to tolerate that. I'm not okay with that. And having a voice and using your voice to show and teach positive, be a positive example.
As being a part of like the younger generation, I think that we as young adults and young teens need to just start taking credibility for our identity and trying to move past all that has happened, and just not being afraid to acknowledge that we're Indigenous and just be proud.
I want to see more younger Indigenous people come out of their comfort zone, because there's a lot of almost every Indigenous youth I've talked to has been shy. Like, they've always been taught that way, is to kind of stay quiet. And it's like, no, be as loud as you want. That's what I want to see coming out of these youth, is to start being loud and to start saying, no, this is what I'm going to do, and this is how we're